All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back. It is the early hours of Saturday, March 15th, 2025. This is day two of our coverage of this major severe weather event. Last night, unfortunately, lived up to expectations. We had a widespread severe weather event from the mid-Mississippi Valley down to the lower Mississippi Valley. Several states saw multiple tornadoes, plenty of wind damage and hail reports, and even back across Texas and Oklahoma, those critical fire weather conditions spawned multiple wildfires and wind gusts high enough to topple semis on the interstate, take down power lines. It was a very active afternoon and evening last night. At least 3 people we know have been killed in Missouri this morning, confirmed by emergency management, in some cities like Rolla and Hartville, also outside of St. Louis. But we expect those reports could go up today as search and rescue is underway in some of the areas hardest hit last night. But unfortunately, today we are looking down the barrel of another major weather event where a high risk is forecast for severe weather across Mississippi and Alabama. And we are looking at the potential for a prolific and widespread tornado outbreak across the Deep South throughout today. So let's go ahead and get into the latest this morning. We'll go ahead and quickly show you the storm reports from last night. Filter reports showing at least 382 reports. And every time I refresh this, it goes up, and it will throughout the day. So that's far from the total report from last night. You can see 258 wind reports, 23 tornado reports, and they'll also go up once the National Weather Service starts doing the surveys they do. So a lot going on last night, and this morning, thankfully, these storms are remaining below severe limits. There's some heavy rain associated with this across central northern Louisiana, moving into Tennessee, northern Alabama, even northern Mississippi getting a little bit this morning. But overall, things are quiet for now, and that's good, and that's also bad. We'll explain why in a minute. But looking at the Storm Prediction Center's website, just as a quick, kind of overview, that again, that high risk corridor, 5 out of 5 on their scale. They do not issue high risk very often. This is about a once in every other year event on average. So this is a incredibly serious day, and this is a big high risk too. This is covering a lot of Mississippi and Alabama. But again, don't focus too much on that corridor. Moderate risk, enhanced risk can still see strong to severe thunderstorms. You could still see destructive wind gusts, large to giant hail, strong tornadoes. But we think in that moderate and especially in that high risk, in that pink, we think that is the potential for violent and long track tornadoes. That is strong EF2 plus and long duration tornadoes that could produce a lot of damage and potentially a loss of life. That is the number one thing we've got to look at so far today. But going back to the radar and satellite presentation this morning, one of the biggest problems we have is there isn't much going on across Mississippi, eastern Louisiana, or Alabama. The storm modes are mostly off to the north, and I hate to say this, but this is a chilling sort of analog to 2011. This is almost exactly how the radar looked. Now, I don't want to say that to be some hype monster, but it's just we're at the point now where this is as bad as real gets. So, just everything is on the table today. There is absolutely nothing not on the table for the Deep South today when it comes to severe weather events. This could be a big one. It could be an all-timer. It could fail. There could be modes that mess up, and we'll talk about that, but not likely. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's driving this in the broad scale real quick. Looking over here on Pivotal Weather, looking at the 500 millibar flow from the North American model. You can see the low pressure that spawned off yesterday's weather is starting to move up into the Great Lakes. That's going to kind of move up and out, and all this, so that will kind of help foster some storms across the Ohio Valley today. They'll typically be much lower in severity than what we're going to see to the south. But we saw this really sharp, deep trough digging into Texas on kind of within this larger upper flow. And all of this energy and jet stream energy and wind shear, everything is moving right towards the Deep South. And those are the next couple, next throughout the day today, that's all going to move in, and that's going to kind of set the stage. We can use the SCUT, the radiosonde, the balloons, the weather balloons we launch. We're doing special balloon launches. This was a early morning launch from Lake Charles in Louisiana. And what we do with weather is we look upstream. When we have something going on in the area we expect it to be in, we look behind where the weather is coming from to kind of determine what to expect. So Lake Charles SCUT has some really concerning features. I'm not going to go super deep in the weeds here, but a couple things to point out. One, the wind shear profiles are dramatic. This is a very, very classic severe weather kind of supercell generating wind shear pattern where you have more southeast winds on the surface, and then they turn clockwise with height and they pick up speed. And that kind of creates this photograph where where it curves off in this direction from the center. Those are some of the things that we look at for potential, supercell sustaining and tornadic developing supercell thunderstorms. That's what we see. Looking at the Lake Charles kind of temperature and dew point curves, we see an elevated mixing layer at this level, and we see a weak cap. So weak caps keep the atmosphere kind of suppressed through the morning hours, let everything heat up and really cook and really get that pressure up high. And then the lid flies off all at one time and all the storms go bonanza. That's unfortunately what we have here. We have just the right amount of capping to likely let that happen. And we have plenty of that dry air intrusion in the mid levels to help generate and sustain those thunderstorms and really kind of drive that mixing and lift and everything we talk about when it comes to severe weather. 8.6 Celsius lapse rates are pretty insane. Low level helicity is quite high, and the forecast surface cape, almost 3,600 for mid-March, is pretty bad. That's about as high as it gets in March. So all these things are moving downstream to Mississippi, to Alabama, and all these ingredients are in place. You have not a lot of interference. You don't have a lot of early morning rain cooling or heavy cloud cover. There just isn't much right now looking like it's going to slow this event down, and it's going to be bad. So again, kind of showing you some of these cities in play here: Hattiesburg, Jackson, Starkville, Tulupo, Meridian. And then you go down the interstate, you go over to Alabama, you're talking about Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, even Montgomery, Talladega. I mean, the list goes on. You can see even in Mobile, Huntsville, Dothan, all these cities, even in that red, that moderate risk, guys. I don't want y'all to just look at that pink and go, oh, well, that's where the tornadoes are going to be. That's where the highest risk of strong to violent tornadoes are. You can get them in the red and even in the orange, really. I mean, the green and the yellow, maybe not so much, maybe more wind, hail, or very small embedded tornadoes. But in the orange and the red and even especially in the pink, that's where the most dangerous weather is going to be today. And it's a large area to cover. So looking at the HRRR, kind of looking at the high resolution simulated radar timing of everything. Again, big open warm sector, nothing really slowing it down this morning. We go into about 10 o'clock in the morning. We see the first storm starting to erupt back across central Mississippi, eastern Louisiana. We'll start to see that convective initiation right around that point. And right about 18Z, about 2 or 3 hours later, this is when things really start going downhill. And I want to kind of highlight something on the HRRR here. So one of the things we look for in classic major severe weather outbreaks is those supercell thunderstorms that we call discrete supercells, the storms that run out ahead of that main line. So we have our main line of storms moving right along the Mississippi River around the early afternoon hours in Mississippi. But what we have at ahead of that is this line of supercell thunderstorms, and they're all got that little kidney bean shape to them. See that little kidney bean kind of look? Those are that classic kind of hook signal you see on the radar, and that's shooting those big anvil tops. It's kind of trying to simulate that, and the model that can kind of model convective processes is trying to scream that it's seeing these big supercell thunderstorms moving ahead of that main line. And those are the type of storms we look at to produce those strong to violent tornadoes and potentially those long track tornadoes where we have a cell of storms that just rotates and cycles tornadoes. That all those things that we see in big outbreaks is what we see here today with that HRRR simulation. And it continues through the afternoon. We go into 22Z, so about 1700, about 5 p.m. local. The model's still simulating a broken line of supercell thunderstorms, some potential massive hail cores in a few of these, and working into central Alabama, even western Alabama. And you can see that main line starting to catch up. Not quite there yet. We go a few more hours in. And again, this spreads through Alabama overnight. And then right around, we'll say midnight or so Central Time, this is when we kind of see the storm mode changing a little bit. So we see that line starting to catch the main supercell line. And then instead, what we kind of wind up with is a potential kind of QLCS mode where we have these cells starting to merge with the main line. But we call them quasi-linear because they're not quite fully in the squall line yet. And this setup actually has the potential to produce a lot more tornadoes, just maybe not as strong of tornadoes, but that's not good either. The more tornadoes you have, the more potential you have for loss of life and property. We don't want that either. So it just kind of changes the threat a little bit, but that marches into Georgia around midnight to 1 a.m., and this will be a nocturnal event that will last several hours longer. This will work into the morning hours. I mean, we're talking about, several hours of the morning, still plenty of energy in the morning. Works into the western Florida Panhandle, moves towards Tallahassee, Atlanta, and then some of northern Florida and all that towards daybreak. So that kind of gets us through the main event today. Again, just cannot stress how high of a risk this is. This is like top end tornado outbreak potential. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about tomorrow. So look at the Storm Prediction Center's broad outlook to you guys in northern Florida. I know people in Jacksonville watch my stuff. You guys are in a slight risk. So the gist for Sunday is this will be weakening. That line of storms that moves into Georgia and then the kind of the central Florida Panhandle around daybreak on Sunday is weakening as it moves towards you guys. So you are not expecting a major, widespread, devastating tornado outbreak like they're expecting in Mississippi and Alabama. But you're still in a slight risk. That is still a 2 out of 5. That's nothing to completely screw around with. And mostly going to be a wind and hail driven threat. We think that some of these storms could produce strong winds. Definitely wind, hail still very possible as well. The tornado risk is a little bit further north. I think we'll definitely see tornado watches from Virginia down to South Carolina. That 2% risk kind of goes either way. And then just a reminder, the tornado we had in Lake Mary last week was in kind of a lower risk setup like this. So it's not impossible. It's just not nearly as likely. Still want to have ways to get alerts. You still want to be vigilant. Even if you don't get a tornado watch, just keep the weather guy on your TV in the background, and just kind of make sure you're keeping an eye on things throughout the morning. Looking at the timeline of when this moves through, this is going to be, again, HRRR, which is zoomed out a little bit. So this is showing you right about daybreak. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning, 9, 10, 11, 12. We start seeing that move into the western counties right around noon. It looks like the timing's shifted back maybe just a tiny bit from what we talked about yesterday, but this is Suwannee, Live Oak, Lake City, McClenny. That kind of gets in on it earlier in the day. Central, southern Georgia, Savannah, Brunswick, Waycross, you guys kind of get in on it as well. And then go to about 2, 3 o'clock, we start seeing this move into like Clay County, Baker, Nassau, and then you go another 2 hours from there. So you're at 20Z, about 1600 local. It's moving through Jacksonville, moving to St. Johns County, Putnam, maybe northern Flagler, and then you get a few more hours after that, and right around 0Z, so about 8 o'clock, this is starting to move offshore, but it still takes a little bit longer. So the kind of things to think about with this, the squall line's not going to move super fast. It's not going to just race in and race out in 30 minutes. We're going to have a couple hours of this, and the storms won't be moving overhead the entire time, or they won't be, you won't be getting a thunderstorm for 3-4 straight hours, but you're going to have these running storms that'll run through, and you'll be kind of heavy for a little bit, then it'll kind of be light rain, then it'll be heavy again. We're talking frequent lightning, heavy downpours, strong wind gusts, potentially damaging wind gusts, power lines, tree branches, that sort of thing. And again, embedded tornado potential, definitely not zero, and hail. I mean, you could probably see some smaller hail with this, maybe even up to like marble size. I could see that, maybe even golf ball size if it really overachieves. So again, not the major outbreak we expect off to the east or off to the west today, and more my neck of the woods. But we do think that this will be kind of strong when it comes through tomorrow and coming in the middle of the day where maximum heating is going on. Definitely a day to keep in mind, be weather aware, and don't have outdoor plans on Sunday across northern Florida. Now today you're good. You're going to be in the upper 80s. It's going to be windy, but you'll be able to get your stuff done. So if you got any outdoor activities planned, do them today. So that's my big update this morning, guys. Again, high risk. It's serious as it gets. 5 out of 5. I mean, they don't issue these very often, and there is, every confidence and everything we have is screaming big tornado outbreaks. So I'm going to be tracking this as much as I possibly can today. I've got to be on standby for a base here in Biloxi. If we get some stronger stuff bubbling up, I'm going to have to go to work. I almost certainly will be at work today at some point. I will do my best to keep up. I am not a real-time tracking page, especially if you're watching me on YouTube. This is not the page to be looking for live feeds. There's plenty of guys that do that stuff. Go watch them. But yeah, local meteorologists, local information, local National Weather Service, have alerts enabled on your phone, and guys, please have a plan. And finally, if you know somebody in these areas, if you know somebody in that high risk, you know somebody in that red moderate risk, please give them a call. Please shoot them a text. Please throw them a message on Facebook. Just make sure they're weather aware. I know if you're watching this, you're like, how could you not know about this? But there's people who are going to be living their lives today in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham and Meridian and Jackson, and they're going to have no idea there's supposed to be this kind of weather today. They're just not going to know. So Please don't, take that for granted, and just check on your people, So that's what I got for you guys today. Follow the Facebook page for all the latest information. That's what I got for you. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.